Hello, Akeem, and welcome to our presentation of 1972's blaxploitation crime and drama film, Superfly. This film focuses on a cocaine dealer who begins to realize his lifestyle will only lead him down a dark path. This picture was made in New York City and was mainly shot in Harlem. It was directed by Gordon Parks and Sig Shore. It was produced by Warner Brothers and Sig Shore International. Superfly grabbed the attention of many African Americans back then. As an article from the New York Times states, the world of Superfly may be hell, but it also makes sense. Tall, handsome, with flowing hair and coat, with flashing eyes, and with a gold cross around his neck that he uses to sniff his own cocaine with, Priest must embody a lifetime of fantasies. With his mammoth car, his apartment downtown, and his rich and elegant woman. Ron O'Neal lives the part, with a kind of furious authority that is sometimes excessive, more often expressive of a role that belongs as much to current myth as to reality. A pretty interesting fact about Superfly is that it was a film whose soundtrack made more than the actual movie. However, many still believe that the film is one of the most significant blaxploitation films of all time, with even Rotten Tomatoes giving it an impressive score of 93%. Superfly needed less than $500,000 to make, but it most definitely cost the outside world, as it inspired a real-life drug dealer by the name of Freeway Rick Ross, who was one of the 80s largest cocaine dealers. Interestingly enough, a remake of Superfly was released in 2018, and unfortunately received a score of 51% and took home $20.8 million at the box office. However, you're not here to listen to facts about the 2018 remake, so without further ado, let's hop into 1972's version of Superfly.
Superfly was one of the most popular films of the blaxploitation film era. The historical context of what was happening years prior to Superfly's release was the transition that was happening to many cities, specifically New York, post-civil rights movement and mid-Vietnam War. During this time, many cities, like New York, were plagued by crime gangs and drugs. The sudden statistical jump regarding the well-being of cities was wrongly attributed to the migration of primarily white communities leaving the city during this time and the influx of African American and Latino communities. This time period largely inspired the blaxploitation period of film. These films reiterated the ideas that African Americans engaged in illegal ventures. But the films also portrayed African Americans as strong people and heroes of their own rights, rather than the commonly seen villain and victim stereotypes that plagued so many films. Superfly is very clearly a film from this time period, but also has some differences that sets it apart from other blaxploitation films of this time. The main character, Youngblood Priest, is a drug dealer that has and lives a very rich and luxurious lifestyle. The film's plot revolves around Priest wanting to get out of a dangerous trade and finding a way to retire from that trade. Priest, like many other blaxploitation heroes, is a strong drug dealer that can stand up for himself against big authority figures. He differs from them narratively in that in this film, he wants to get out of the business. However, the way he goes about it, coming up with a scheme, is very much in line with other blaxploitation films. Some concerns and problems that the film covers is, of course, that of rising crime, but also historically touching upon how the post-civil rights movement generation of African Americans sought to reinvent themselves and rise in the new American class system, very much in the same way of how Youngblood Priest also attempts to do throughout the film.
Thanks, Brandon, for that detailed historical context and analysis. Hey everyone, I'm Basil, and I'm here today to talk about our formal analysis. My fellow teammates have of course already mentioned that we're speaking on the blaxploitation movement through the movie Superfly. And with that genre comes unique stylistic choices that let us link similar movies together, such as Foxy Brown to Coffee to Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, for example. The blaxploitation movement is characterized not only by stereotyped roles within the films, but more specifically how it is shot, what is being said, who is playing music, and the list goes on and on. And it's quite evident that Superfly, an entry in the movement that, as Ethna Quinn points out, sparked the greatest controversy, won the largest black youth audience, and has proved the most culturally influential, shares most of these traits. What I love most about how it was shot is that Superfly was no easy feat. As Stephen Reifel shares in The Politics of Superfly, quote, "The film was shot on 35mm short ends, and production stopped 3 times when Shore ran out of stock. There were even run-ins with local gangs who wanted protection money to enable the filmmakers to shoot in the neighborhood. It wasn't going to be easy, but Superfly was to be made, regardless of issues they ran into." However, I digress. You're here to see a scene and have me break it down for you. So let's do that. There are so many great scenes that, as Joaquin says, are highly illustrative of the aesthetics of the message of the film. Yet the one we found to be best representative of it is right at the beginning of the movie at 9 minutes or so. Let's take a look at just one of the clips that best represent the film. This scene is perfect because it's a great example of what blaxploitation stands for. First and foremost, we've got swearing, and what some may perceive to be a stereotypical character in these films, a druggie and a drug lord, who's our main character, Youngblood Priest. These two types of people are common amongst all films of this type, and Superfly is no different. Second, we're also looking at a chase scene which is, in and of itself, too common. While you might consider this to be more of an action trait, given the nature of the characters and the typical themes and topics, a chase scene is more than welcome in this environment and makes its way into the film. Yet what you're really here for is the technique, and there's clearly lots of quirks and features about this scene in particular. For starters, the camera technique isn't great, seen clearly here when you actually see the camera wire pass through the screen. They were working with what they had, but poor cinematography is a blaxploitation trait. Similarly, the audio isn't perfect either. It'd be like if you were to use a built-in mic in a camera of today. It's not great, but it gets the job done. I will give credit for the different types of shots, but it's mostly place camera here, then shoot, which is fine, but again, adds to the overall quality. And of course, the Curtis Mayfield track placed below is great music that I'd listen to, sans movie by the way, that works really well here. It sets an intense mood right from the beginning. In reality though, Superfly is an interesting movie as a whole, and this scene is representative of the whole 90-minute production. We chose to analyze this scene over others simply because of its time in the film. It's a chase scene right at the beginning, and without even knowing any of the characters, you know who to follow, who's right and who's wrong, and what to expect right at the beginning of the movie, and that's great. Because blaxploitation films are marked with dark themes, a scene like this really speaks for itself. Its formal elements, weak cinematography, not so great audio, straightforward editing, and music that slaps, all make this excerpt from Superfly easy to understand when speaking about the genre. I'll hand it over now to Ethan to talk about some contextualization within Superfly.
It's important to note how Superfly adheres and differentiates itself from genre-related and artistic trends. The movie takes heavy influence from established genres such as action films, gangster flicks, and drug-related movies. Where the film differentiates itself, however, is how it fits into the realm of blaxploitation. Many landmark movies had already came out before Superfly's release, such as 1971's Shaft and Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. Superfly, coming out a year later, built off the tropes of its predecessors, whether it was its low-budget cinematography, the incorporation of established funk and soul music, or the perpetuation of stereotypes of pimps and drug dealers. Superfly, as well as blaxploitation films in general, centered around the romanticization of black people and culture. As a result, many blaxploitation films, but Superfly especially, were met with great pushback and criticism from civil rights groups such as the NAACP and CORE. E. Quinn, in her journal article Trying to Get Over, references black journalist Nathan McCall, who remarked how Superfly influenced the style, thinking, and choices that a lot of young black men began making around that time. The effects of this influence on style still perpetuate through Hollywood today, from stories centralized around racial tensions to the stereotypical adoption of lawless behavior, or the larger trend of black misrepresentation in media in general. However, despite all its negative effects, Superfly still remains as a landmark achievement. In the aforementioned article, Quinn also notes how the film set two racial precedents in mainstream American filmmaking: the first major distributed film to be financed predominantly by black limited partnerships, and the first to have a largely non-white technical crew. Such landmarks become so important, especially when considering the history of black representation in Hollywood. Whether it was with race films in the 1920s, or even the Sidney Poitier films in the 1960s, black creators weren't given much representation both behind and in front of the camera to tell their stories. With the rise of blaxploitation in films like Superfly, which were directed, scripted, and soundtracked by black people, there became a push to tell more authentic and multi-dimensional stories, ones grounded in socio-political messages, serving as a capsule of the racial tensions of the era. Though it wasn't a movie without its problems, Superfly did serve as a step in the right direction.
Superfly is, unquestionably, a blaxploitation movie. We hope that you're able to take away a good understanding of the film's production, plot, and traits, but even more so, a working knowledge of the characteristics that set it in this genre. Superfly isn't perfect, but it's definitely a film that deepens our understanding of film in the 1970s.